Hey everybody, this is Retro604, Airblade Team Pilot. Today we're going to build a cream puff. First thing I'm going to do is get you a tool and parts list, and we'll go from there. So check this out. Okay, so let's go over what we've got here. We're just going to be using the bottom plate out of the cream puff kit on this build. I take a paint pen from Michaels and color the edges. It's optional. It looks cool. Whatever you want to do. XM Plus receiver. Super light. Diversity. Great. Your motor bolts and bag of hardware from the cream puff kit. Cicada 4-in-1 ESC. Special edition Airblade 10,000 kV motors in atomic green. What more could you ask for? You can go a lower kV if you want. You might get a little bit more battery life. It's up to you, really. They all work. Pico BLX. Again, this is your choice. You can go with the F4. Really, any 20x20 will work with this kit. And for the purposes of this tutorial, pretty much any flight controller will work as well, because we're just going to be using the UART port and power and stuff. So TQ169 all-in-one camera, fits the mount, great. XT30 connector, don't forget that. It doesn't come in the bag with any of the other stuff, so you're going to have to order this separately. Alright, let's get started building. Okay, the first thing we're going to do is lay out the ESC onto the frame. I'm going to check the motor wire lengths and make sure that we don't have to trim or add to the motor wires. Now, if you want to get really clean with it, you can probably trim a little bit off some of the other motors. That's up to you. I generally tend to leave them a little bit longer in case I want to use it on another build or whatever. Okay, so first thing we're going to do is solder our motors to the ESC board. Now you're going to want to take off this plastic here because it will interfere with the bolt holes. Okay, got our ESC board here. Let's trim the wires down and stick the XT30 connector on it. Make sure that you use flux on your pads and on your wires. Some people don't. They say that there's enough in the rosin core solder. There isn't. It'll never adhere properly. You're going to end up with cold solder joints and your quad's going to fall out of the sky and you're not going to be happy. So spend $5 on a big tub of this stuff and it will last you probably your entire lifetime. Take a couple pieces of heat shrink, cut them about yay big. Slide them over your power wires first. Ooh, look at that. Another one inside there. Bonus. Okay. Take your XT30 and film magic. You can go a little bit longer. Just remember, the longer the cable is, the more likely it is to get caught in the props, or it also adds weight too. Just before I start to solder up the motor wires, I just want to show you guys these things here. I highly suggest you get some of these. These are the spacers that are 3D printed. Now, the problem with using regular standoffs is these chips here are too close. So they fit, kind of, but what happens is when you turn the screw, I don't know if you can see that, if you turn it while it's on the frame, it can actually knock off those chips, and of course your 401 is shot. So what we've come up with is these 3D printed spacers. They make a nice stack. It's an even shorter stack, looks better, and they will not damage your equipment. So I highly suggest grabbing a couple of these when you get your Eclair or Creampuff kit. Anyway, yeah, get them. Okay, so we're going to use the bottom pads on this 4-in-1. You can use the top ones if you want. It's up to you. But I'm going to use the bottom pads. It's going to make it a little bit cleaner. And the first thing we're going to do is put some nice blobs of solder onto these pads so that our wires will stick properly. So let's do that. Okay, all done. You can see the little blobs of solder I have on the pads now. So basically when you're trying to solder stuff, the idea is that you just want to melt that blob a little bit and stick the wire in. That's how you get the best bond. I kind of suck at soldering, so if I can do it, anybody can. Let's get these motors attached. Okay, so you're going to solder, for motor 1, you're going to solder the first wire here to A1 and down the line. The middle wire goes to B1. And C1. Okay, so that's attached now. Just trim off any little excess, just to make sure that you don't have any kind of shorts here. Like anything that's sticking out might short, so trim that off. Okay, so we've got motor 1 attached. This motor spins clockwise since it's motor 1, so that's how we hook that one up. The second motor that we're going to hook up actually spins counterclockwise, so you can change that in Betaflight, but it's preferable to change it here instead. So what we're going to do is we're going to solder it up almost the same way, but we're going to swap the outboard wires around, and that will make it spin the other way. Okay, so we now have one motor spinning, motor 1 attached, motor 2 attached. Motor 1 is spinning clockwise, motor 2 is spinning counterclockwise. So let's get on to the other ones. Same thing. Motor 3 is going to spin counterclockwise as well, so we're going to start with that one. And wire it up exactly the same way we did motor 2. I don't use straps myself, so I kind of skipped this part, but adding it in later. If you want to use a strap, run it through the holes in the bottom of the frame before you put the ESC board on. Otherwise, you're going to have a real hard time getting it on. I like rubber bands, but if you want to use a strap, put it on before this next step. Okay, looks like we've got something going here. We got all the motors connected, and now we are going to mount the ESC board to the frame. So let's do that. There's a couple different options for doing this. Like I said before, if you use the regular spacers, you may damage your board. Now, if you don't have these things, don't freak out. You can do something about it. I've done it before. All you really need to do is take this little stand off here, take a razor blade, and shave the part off that is going to be close to those chips. These standoffs don't need to hold a lot of weight. They're not going to get hit or bashed that hard that shaving a little bit off here is going to make a difference. These are way easier and they do provide a bit of damping to the flight controller too, so I highly suggest you get them. But if you don't have them, yes, you can build this kit with what's in the actual bag, okay? So we are not going to do that. We're going to use the spacers. So you take the spacer here. Now you can just slap it in here just like this. I think I just want to see if there's going to be enough room underneath here for the way I have the wires. If there isn't, you can just trim off this crossbar thing here. You really only need the little tabs, these little posts. You can trim all the rest of this off to make more room in between your flight controller stack or whatever you want to do. So these are just here so that it can be 3D printed mostly, right? So trim that if you want. Just take some, snip those off. Done. We might still have to do that here, but let's see. Okay, so take the 4 bolts that come in the kit, stick them through the frame like so. Oh, now we're going to take a spacer, and we're just going to stuff it down there. Just has to get through a little bit. Yeah. Okay. I can just turn the screws a little bit to get them, because once you've got the spacer on there, they're fairly tight. They're meant to be that way. So just turn them a little bit so that you've got something for the FC to sit on, like that. Or the ESC board in this case, because that's what we're putting on. But the same applies for when you're putting on the flight controller. We set this guy up to run the flight controller diagonally so that you can run 2.5-inch props. I'm actually going to finish the build with it directly facing forward because I am planning on running the new gem fan props on this. They are 2-inch, and I have some other ideas for stuff that I want to put on these points here. So we're going to make this one facing straight forward, but you do know how to do it 45 degrees if you want to run the Rotorex 2.5-inch props. That's an option for you. We're going to go ahead with the straight up 2-inch build though. Let's get the motors bolted down. For the Creampuff, you're going to want to use the 3mm screws, the shortest ones that come in the bag. Don't use longer screws because if you get too close to the winding with the screw, it'll kill the motor or cause weird shit to happen. Okay. So I'm going to use some Loctite on the bolts. You don't have to do this, but if you want your bolts to stay, I suggest it. It just takes a tiny little dab, and again, a tube of this will last you almost forever. So I'm going to put a tiny dab on each screw and then put them in. There we go. So we've got a nice solid connection, and the stack is tiny. Guys, I'm using the 6 amp ESC board in this build. It has a built-in BEC, so the way I've got it wired up is correct for my build. But if you are building the kit, you probably got the 10 amp board, which will allow you to run 3S if you want. That board doesn't have a built-in BEC, so instead of connecting the red and black lines, because there won't be any, you're just going to tap off the power leads and connect that to the BAT plus and BAT minus on the Pico or your FC of choice. All right. Let's go ahead and lay out these signal wires and the power and ground wires and trim them up and then solder them on. Once you have your wires trimmed to the proper length, you can run them wherever you want, but I'm going to just lift the flight controller up and run these two wires, the blue and the yellow wire, underneath the flight controller and out, so it just looks a little cleaner. Once you've got your wires shortened the way you want them, let's connect them to the flight controller. So red and black is going to go to positive and negative on the flight controller here, these two holes, if you can see them. Everything's clearly marked on the board, so if you can't see because of my camera or whatever, just take a look at the board. It's marked. You want bat plus and bat minus. You're going to connect power to that. Signal 1 is orange. Signal 2, blue to signal 2, signal 3, yellow to signal 3, and signal 4, green to signal 4 pad. So everything's connected now. I'm just going to go over the colors again to make sure that you've got everything in the right place. You've got the red going to bat plus. You've got the black going to bat minus. You've got the orange going to signal 1, blue signal 2, yellow signal 3, and green signal 4. Let's talk about the pod. Now, you're going to have your TQ169 in here, and if you pull back this little protector here, and be really careful about how you slide it in, you can fit the XM in behind here and have a nice little package. When you put this on to the flight controller, be really careful about how tight you bring it down. This board can flex pretty easy, and if it flexes, you're going to break the solder on these chips, and it's done. So just be really careful. Like, only tighten it down as much as you need to. There's not going to be a whole lot of force on it, hopefully, and you're not going to... Don't crank it down, that's all I'm saying, okay? So let's tin the connections that we're going to use for the camera power and the 3 wires that are coming off of the receiver. You're going to have power, ground, and signal. If you look at the Pico, they're going to be along this side here. They aren't marked on the top, but if you look underneath the board here, they are clearly marked. It's going to be ground, 5 volt, and then RX2 is what you're going to use, and that corresponds to UART2. So we'll use these 3 here: ground, power, signal, and then these 2 outboard here are going to be for the camera power, ground, power. That will give it 5 volts, and we should be good to go. Okay, once you've got your pod on here and everything all soldered up, it's pretty much ready to test. We're going to put a few small nuts on here. Just going to finger tighten them. We now have a completed Airblade Creampuff. You can see the stack is really short. This extremely light. With these 10,000 kV motors, this thing is going to scream. Now, I don't care how many quads you've built. I've built a lot, and every time you plug it in the first time, you're always worried, are you going to see magic smoke or are you going to see lights? So let's give it a shot. Magic smoke or lights? Looks like we got lights. No magic smoke. Receiver's powered up. VTX is powered up. Everything looks solid. Just waiting for bind and beta flight configuration, which we will talk about in part 2 of this build guide.